In 1927, while excavating deep beneath the ancient ruins of Nippur, archaeologists uncovered a small clay tablet hidden inside a sealed pottery jar that had remained untouched for nearly 4,000 years. The museum cataloger who first inspected the artifact examined it for less than 40 minutes, made a single cautious note in the records, and then tucked it away in a basement drawer, where it remained forgotten and unread for the next 44 years. When a young philologist from Oxford finally translated the tablet in 1971, she spent months refusing to publish its astonishing contents. According to the inscription, a small four-legged creature had been sent from the heavens to earth. That creature, the tablet claimed, was the cat, and it explained the purpose for which it had been created. The remarkable journey of this forgotten artifact back into the world began with Eleanor Ashworth, a junior Oxford philologist who arrived at the University of Pennsylvania Museum in the spring of 1971 as part of a 6-month academic exchange. At just 29 years old, Ashworth specialized in temple records from the late 3rd millennium BCE, and she was assigned a task that every senior scholar had quietly avoided. Museum employees jokingly referred to it as the residue drawer, a neglected collection of nearly 200 small clay tablets, broken fragments, and seal impressions recovered during the Nippur excavations of the 1920s but never properly studied. Most of those forgotten pieces contained nothing more than routine administrative records, grain inventories, receipts for sheep, lists of temple workers, and careful accounts of food rations. They were the kind of bureaucratic leftovers that accumulate in every Mesopotamian dig, waiting patiently, sometimes for decades, for someone willing to spend the time deciphering them. During her 3rd week at the museum, Ashworth opened drawer 14. Inside, wrapped in aging oil-treated cotton that had become stiff and fragile over the years, she found a clay tablet no larger than the palm of a man's hand. Its cuneiform markings were carved with extraordinary precision and care, almost as if the ancient scribe had known he was preserving something so important that it could never be rewritten. The accompanying catalog card identified it simply as N2847 and included only one brief note written by an assistant cataloger back in 1927, who admitted he had spent less than an hour studying it. The note read, "Content appears religious or mythological. Defer to senior staff." But no senior scholar ever returned to examine it. Instead, the tablet sat in silence for 44 long years. Years later, Ashworth wrote in a private letter to a colleague at Cambridge that she realized within the first 6 translated lines that the artifact had never belonged in the residue drawer. It belonged somewhere else, she wrote, somewhere the museum had not yet invented a category for. Based on the style of its writing, she dated the tablet to the final years of the 3rd dynasty of Ur, placing its creation more than 4 millennia before her own lifetime. In the opening passage, the ancient scribe identified himself with a name that roughly translates as Enmeter, son of Kerningel, a temple official who served at the Iker, the great sanctuary of the god Enlil in the city of Nippur. The introduction followed the traditional formal style. It opened with prayers to the high gods, requested the blessing of the heavenly scribe, and declared that everything written afterward was a faithful account of an ancient matter passed down through generations. According to the inscription, the story had been given to the author by his father, who had received it from his own father, continuing an unbroken chain of tradition that stretched all the way back, so the tablet claimed, to the age when the gods still walked openly among humanity and the doors of the upper places had not yet been closed. That mysterious phrase, the doors of the upper places, appears repeatedly throughout the tablet, and Ashworth spent nearly an entire year trying to understand exactly what it meant. By 1973, in an unpublished monograph, she argued that the phrase referred to actual physical locations on Earth, places where the ancient Sumerians believed the boundary separating the visible world from another realm became exceptionally thin. That detail may seem minor at first, but as the story unfolds, it becomes one of the tablet's most important ideas. Then, sitting alone beneath the quiet glow of the museum's reading lamps, Ashworth reached the section that explained why the tablet had originally been sealed inside a jar. The ancient scribe described the arrival on Earth of a small four-legged creature, one that had been brought down from the heavens by the Anunnaki for a purpose summarized in 3 simple but powerful words. The watching. The guarding. The keeping. Ashworth quietly laid the tablet on the table, left the reading room for nearly an hour to gather her thoughts, and then returned, determined to continue the translation. The next section tells the story of that extraordinary arrival. According to the scribe, the Anunnaki descended from their dwelling places in the higher heavens to observe the earliest settlements of humankind. What they found among humanity deeply troubled them. People had become sick while they slept. Their minds were crowded with strange forms and thoughts that did not belong to them. Children woke in the middle of the night, pointing fearfully toward the dark corners of their homes where nothing visible could be seen, crying until the first light of dawn finally arrived. The elders turned to the priests for guidance, and the priests carried their pleas to the sacred offering stones, believing those stones would deliver the message to the heavens. According to the tablet, the gods recognized the source of humanity's suffering immediately because it was a danger they had encountered long before. Without hesitation, the inscription explains that beings from beyond the thin places had begun slipping into human homes while people slept, feeding on what the scribe called the inner light. Faced with this threat, the Anunnaki gathered together to decide how it should be stopped. Among them, a deity named Ninkarik, known as the Lady of the Foothills, offered a solution. Her proposal was to bring to earth a small creature from a distant world that the tablet never identifies by name, referring to it only as the green star of the seventh house. The text explains that this creature already existed there for one very specific purpose. It possessed eyes capable of seeing what human vision could never perceive, and although its body was small, it carried an unusual energy that the beings from beyond the thin places could not endure or approach. Nearly 1/3 of the tablet is devoted to describing this mysterious animal, and there is little doubt about what it is referring to. It speaks of a creature with 4 legs and a tail that could be held in many different positions, each one conveying its own meaning. Its eyes gathered light and reflected it back, allowing them to glow in darkness. Its paws were covered with soft pads that let it move across the ground in complete silence. The tablet also describes a coat of fur that produced tiny sparks whenever it was stroked against the grain, almost as though traces of lightning still lived beneath its skin. The creature, the scribe notes, spends nearly 2/3 of its life asleep, yet its sleep is nothing like that of human beings. Instead, he describes it as a form of watching disguised as rest. Whenever the creature awakens, slowly rises, and fixes its attention on an empty corner where no person appears to be standing, the tablet says it is carrying out the very task for which it was first brought to earth. The scribe gives this remarkable animal a special name, and that single word would become the source of Eleanor Ashworth's greatest challenge. Rather than using the ordinary Sumerian word for a cat, the tablet calls it Mushhattab. After much hesitation, Ashworth translated the term as, the holder of the door. She struggled with this interpretation because surviving Sumerian texts consistently used the word shur for an ordinary domestic cat. The term Mushhattab appears nowhere else, not in any other tablet, not at any other archaeological site. It exists only once, on tablet N2847. In the monograph she completed in 1973, Ashworth argued that Mushhattab had never been an everyday name for the animal. Instead, she believed it was a sacred title used exclusively by priests when referring to the cat's original and divine purpose. In everyday conversation and in the marketplace, people simply called the animal shur. Within the temples, however, when priests spoke of the sacred duty for which it had been sent to earth, they called it Mushhattab, the one who keeps the door closed. The next section of the tablet explains how these creatures were introduced into the human world. The Anunnaki, the scribe says, brought down many of them, so many that their number exceeded the leaves of a single olive tree. They were first placed inside the temples. From there, they were sent into the homes of the priests. Next they were entrusted to kings. Only after that were they allowed into the homes of ordinary people. The sequence was intentional, and the tablet carefully explains why. The temples received them first because, according to the Sumerian worldview, those sacred buildings stood directly upon the thin places. They had been deliberately constructed over these locations to mark them and to regulate whatever attempted to pass between worlds. The cats were placed there because they could accomplish what priests, despite all their rituals, prayers, and offerings, could never achieve alone. Their duty was simple but essential. To stand at the doorway. To watch whatever tried to cross. And to send it back. One passage, however, has puzzled translators more than any other. It describes exactly what happens whenever one of these creatures notices something that does not belong. The tablet says the cat becomes wide. Its fur rises. Its tail swells until it appears much larger than normal. It turns its body sideways toward the unseen presence, making itself look bigger than it truly is. Its shining eyes remain fixed without blinking. Then, deep within its throat, another change occurs. The scribe describes the sound it makes as stones grinding slowly together beneath deep water. According to the tablet, this sound is not an expression of fear or anger. It is the sound through which the cat closes the door. Anyone who has shared a home with a cat has probably witnessed something strangely similar. Perhaps you've watched one suddenly freeze, staring intently at an empty corner. Its fur rises. Its tail grows thick. A low, rumbling growl vibrates from deep inside its chest while nothing visible stands before it. Modern explanations usually call this instinct, an unfamiliar scent, a hidden noise, or some subtle movement beyond human perception. But the tablet offers an entirely different explanation. It insists that none of those reasons are correct. According to the ancient scribe, the cat is simply doing the work it was created to perform. At the very heart of the tablet lies the passage that caused Eleanor Ashworth to put the artifact down, leave the reading room, and spend nearly an hour collecting herself before continuing. It is here that the scribe reveals, one by one, the 7 sacred functions that define the creature's original purpose. The scribe records these 7 purposes one after another, using the calm, precise tone found in official Sumerian records, almost as if he were documenting the daily responsibilities of a temple servant. In many ways, the tablet suggests, that is exactly what he was doing. The first duty is the protection of those who sleep. According to the tablet, when a person falls asleep, the inner light loosens within the body, becoming less firmly anchored than it is during waking hours. It is in this vulnerable state, the scribe explains, that the unhoused can most easily reach it. The term unhoused refers to the beings that exist beyond the thin places, entities that possess no physical bodies of their own. By lying close to a sleeping person, curling against them, or resting quietly at the foot of the bed, the cat anchors that inner light back into the body, preventing it from being drawn away. The tablet would argue that anyone who has ever shared a bed with a cat already knows this feeling, even if they have never questioned it. It speaks of unusually deep, peaceful sleep, the absence of certain troubling dreams, and the strange sensation upon waking that somehow, during the night, you had been kept safer than you otherwise would have been. The second duty is the watching of the doorway. Every home has a doorway, and in the tablet's understanding, every doorway is itself a small thin place. That is because a doorway is a point of transition, and according to the scribe, the unhoused are naturally drawn to places where one state becomes another. For this reason, the cat often sits silently near entrances, sometimes remaining there for hours, carefully observing everything that comes in and everything that leaves. The scribe insists this behavior is not driven by curiosity. The cat watches because someone must. The third duty is the testing of new arrivals. Whenever an unfamiliar object enters a home, a stranger crosses the threshold, or a gift is brought inside, the cat approaches first. It sniffs the object. It touches it with a paw. To most people, this seems like simple curiosity. The tablet says otherwise. According to the scribe, the cat is conducting an inspection. Its purpose is to determine whether the newcomer carries any trace of contamination from the other side of the thin places. If the cat calmly accepts the object or person, then it is considered safe. But if it recoils, hisses, refuses to approach, or avoids the room where the object has been placed, the tablet advises that the item should immediately be removed from the house and never returned. The fourth duty is the marking. As the cat wanders through the home, rubbing its face against corners, furniture legs, and door frames, it leaves behind tiny traces of its own invisible signature. The tablet claims this signature creates something far more important than scent. It transforms the dwelling into a place the unhoused cannot comfortably enter. A home continuously marked by a cat eventually becomes, in the scribe's words, sealed against the lower entries. Without such protection, every house remains, by default, unsealed. The fifth duty is the breaking of silence. The tablet explains that the unhoused thrive in stillness. Quiet homes provide the easiest opportunities for them to cross through the thin places. This, the scribe says, explains one of the cat's strangest habits. Its sudden bursts of energy. Its frantic sprint through empty hallways in the middle of the night. Its unexplained leaps toward things no one else can see. These moments are not random acts of foolishness. They are deliberate interruptions. According to the tablet, whenever silence begins to form a doorway between worlds, the cat breaks that silence before the passage can fully open. The cat does not race through the house at 3 o'clock in the morning because it is behaving irrationally. It runs because something has attempted to enter, and it is chasing that presence back where it came from. The sixth duty is the holding of the gaze. Years later, Eleanor Ashworth would describe this section as the most unsettling passage on the entire tablet. The scribe explains that there are moments when a cat fixes its eyes on one precise spot in a room and refuses to look away, sometimes remaining perfectly still for an astonishing length of time. According to the tablet, that location is never random. It is always the exact place where something is trying to enter. The gaze itself becomes the barrier. As long as the cat continues looking, the passage cannot be completed. The creature sees the intrusion. It holds it in place. And by holding it, it prevents it from crossing over. The seventh and final duty, the scribe admits, cannot truly be explained using human language. He writes that even his own teachers struggled to describe the idea fully. He refers to it only as the giving of the throat sound. It is the deep, slow vibration produced by the creature after its work has been completed. The sound we know today as the purr. The tablet insists that a cat does not purr simply because it feels content or comfortable. Instead, it describes the purr as a specific frequency woven into the creature's very design. According to the inscription, that vibration seals whatever small opening remains in the thin place after the previous 6 duties have been carried out. Within the tablet's understanding, the purr is not merely a comforting sound. It is the final seal. Eleanor Ashworth completed her full translation in the spring of 1973. The finished manuscript filled 41 pages. Confident in her research, she submitted it to 3 respected academic journals. Every one of them rejected it. One editor returned the paper with a brief letter explaining that its subject matter was inappropriate for a serious philological publication. Another journal sent the work out for peer review, only to report that its reviewers could not agree on whether the manuscript represented legitimate scholarship or an exceptionally elaborate fabrication. The third journal kept the translation for 9 months before quietly mailing it back, without a single comment or explanation. Ashworth chose not to publish the translation publicly. Instead, she quietly distributed mimeographed copies to a small group of trusted colleagues at Oxford, Cambridge, Leiden, and the University of Chicago. Those copies circulated discreetly from hand to hand, then were photocopied, copied again, and gradually found their way into the underground world of fringe Mesopotamian research, where they continue to circulate even today. As for the tablet itself, it was quietly removed in 1981 from the public archives of the Penn Museum and relocated to a restricted storage room deep in the museum's lower basement. Since then, anyone wishing to study it has needed written authorization from the curator of the Near Eastern collection. Researchers who have requested access over the last 4 decades tell remarkably similar stories. Almost every application has been denied. No explanation is offered. The drawer remains locked. As the inscription nears its conclusion, the scribe turns his attention to a troubling question. What would happen if these creatures were no longer among humanity? The answer, he explains, was the same one the priests of the Iker temple always gave whenever the question arose. If the cats ever withdrew from their task, the thin places would begin opening once again, one after another. The unhoused would return to the homes of mankind. Children would once more wake in the middle of the night, pointing toward empty corners no one else could see. Then, over the course of only 3 generations, the civilization built upon the assumption of unseen protection would slowly begin to unravel, not through war or disaster, but quietly, almost without anyone noticing why. The remarkable thing is that the scribe records these warnings without emotion or dramatic language. There is no panic. No prophecy. Only the calm documentation of teachings passed down by men whose responsibility, he believed, was to understand such matters. Near the end of the tablet, the scribe suddenly shifts his attention to whoever might read these words in the distant future. He explains that he wrote the tablet because the knowledge it preserves was already beginning to disappear. Even during his own lifetime, he laments, temple officials had started treating cats as nothing more than ordinary animals. They fed them carelessly. They drove them away from sacred places. They gradually abandoned the prayers once spoken both when a cat was born and when it died. Yet despite humanity's forgetfulness, the scribe insists the cats themselves would never abandon their purpose. Their work, he writes, is woven into their very nature. No amount of human neglect can erase it. The danger, instead, lies with the people who stop honoring them. Such people, he warns, will unknowingly live in houses that are no longer fully sealed. The tablet closes with a final sentence. Part of it has been damaged over the centuries, yet the most important words remain perfectly readable. The cats remember what we have forgotten, and that is why they look at us the way they do. If the tablet's account is taken seriously, the history that follows begins to resemble one long, gradual process of forgetting. Roughly 1,000 years after the scribe of Nippur pressed his stylus into clay, the Egyptians elevated cats to a level of reverence unmatched by almost any other civilization. Their goddess Batet, depicted with the head of a cat and the body of a woman, became the protector of homes, the guardian of children, and the defender of households against evil. Cats were carefully mummified after death. They were buried in dedicated cemeteries reserved specifically for them. When a family's cat died, its owners shaved off their eyebrows as a public sign of mourning, the same gesture reserved for the loss of close human relatives. Even accidentally killing a cat could carry the penalty of death. None of these extraordinary customs make much sense if cats were valued only because they hunted rodents. But viewed through the lens of the tablet, every one of those practices suddenly appears perfectly logical. It suggests that the Egyptians inherited an older understanding from the Sumerians before them, that cats were guardians whose original assignment had never truly ended. In that view, Egypt did not invent its reverence for cats. It simply received an ancient tradition and continued it. By the time of Rome, however, much of that memory had already faded. Centuries later, during medieval Europe, the old belief had not merely disappeared, it had been turned completely upside down. Religious authorities began associating cats with witchcraft and dark forces. Ironically, the very behaviors the tablet identifies as protective duties, staring into empty space, racing through the house at night, silently watching doorways, were reinterpreted as evidence that cats served the very powers they were supposedly created to oppose. For centuries, enormous numbers of cats were killed across Europe with official approval and encouragement. If the tablet is correct, those were the years when Europe's homes stood spiritually unsealed. And when cats slowly returned after the persecutions faded, they quietly resumed the same task they had always performed, protecting households that had long since forgotten why they needed protection in the first place. If we allow ourselves, even briefly, to consider Ashworth's translation as a genuine possibility, it forces us to rethink almost everything we assume about our relationship with cats. We tend to believe they belong to us. The tablet suggests something very different. It claims they were deliberately placed among us. We often say that humans domesticated cats. The tablet would argue that cats simply accepted an assignment. We imagine that we provide them with food and shelter in exchange for affection and companionship. According to the ancient inscription, the arrangement is almost the reverse. We offer food and shelter because they continue performing a task that no human being is capable of carrying out. That cat sitting quietly on the windowsill, staring into what appears to be empty space, may not be staring at nothing at all. The cat that suddenly races through the hallway at 3 o'clock in the morning may not be running without a reason. And the cat curled against your chest, purring softly as you drift off to sleep, may be doing far more than simply expressing comfort or affection. According to the tablet, every one of these familiar behaviors traces back to the same 7 sacred functions the ancient scribe recorded more than 4,000 years ago. Though civilizations forgot their meaning, the creature itself never did. The purpose remained, preserved not in books or temples, but in the cat's own nature. Eleanor Ashworth passed away in 2007 without ever seeing her translation accepted or published by a major academic press. Yet the mimeographed copies she quietly distributed continue to circulate among small circles of researchers and enthusiasts. The tablet itself still rests in its restricted drawer beneath the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. And, according to those who have sought access, permission to study it continues to be denied. Meanwhile, cats remain exactly where they have always been. In houses. In apartments. In barns. In narrow alleyways. In every place they have chosen to make their home. They still settle beside doorways. They still stare into empty corners. They still race through silent rooms in the middle of the night. They still fix their gaze on things no one else appears able to see. And when their unseen work is finished, they produce that deep vibration in their throats, the same sound a scribe of Nippur described thousands of years ago as the final seal. Whether you accept the story written on the tablet or dismiss it entirely. Whether you believe in the Anunnaki, the mysterious green star of the 7th house, or none of it at all. There is one simple observation that requires no belief. If you share your home with a cat, watch it tonight. Pay attention to where it chooses to go after the lights are turned off. Notice the place where it settles when the entire house falls silent. Watch carefully when it fixes its eyes on an empty space where, as far as you can tell, absolutely nothing exists. Then ask yourself one honest question. Are you looking at an ordinary animal displaying ordinary instincts? Or are you witnessing a creature that arrived here an unimaginably long time ago with a single, carefully defined purpose, a purpose it has continued to fulfill without interruption ever since? The ancient scribe claimed only to record what had been entrusted to him. He wrote with the quiet confidence of someone who believed his duty was not to persuade, but simply to preserve the truth as he had received it. And with that, he left behind one final thought. The cats remember what we have forgotten. Perhaps, he suggests, that is why they look at us the way they do. If this story made you stop and think, if it made you look at the cat sleeping in your home just a little differently, then don't let it end here. Share this video with someone who loves ancient mysteries, forgotten history, or simply shares their life with a cat. You never know who might see these familiar behaviors in a completely new light after hearing this story. And if you enjoy exploring forgotten legends, hidden archaeological discoveries, and mysterious stories that blur the line between history and myth, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are many more incredible stories waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss the next one.